Aloha! You are listening to Inside the Desert Oasis Room, episode number 140. This episode is sponsored by Tandawai Rum, the world's largest rum producer and winner of over 170 international medals in the past 4 decades. Check out their webpage at tandawaiusa.com or follow them on Facebook or Instagram at tandawaiusa. This episode is sponsored by the Tiki Bar T-Shirt Club, where their monthly T-shirt designs pay tribute to a Polynesian bar or restaurant from days long past. Each design is available for a limited time and will never be produced again. For more information and to check out this month's shirt, visit tikibartshirtclub.com. On this episode, we podcast live from San Diego Comic-Con 2019 and bring to you the Tiki Art and Polynesian Pop in American Culture panel, moderated by James Wasser. I was privileged to not only document but also participate in this panel, along with other luminaries in the current Tiki movement, including artists Josh Shag Agle, Bosko Hrnjak, Tom Big Toe Laura, Suzy AtomiKitty Mosher, Devon Devereaux, author Martin S. Lindsay, and mug makers Brandon Giraldez and Holden Westland. We chat about each panelist's respective contributions, observations, and personal perspectives in the modern-day Tiki movement from the largest comic, art, and pop culture convention in the world, the San Diego Comic-Con. As always, I hope you enjoy this episode as much as we did bringing it to you. And if you did, hit that subscribe button. Subscribing makes it easier for you to follow our adventures. Shares on your social media pages are always appreciated. And if you'd like to help support the show, go to desertoasisroom.com to pick up some merch or make a donation. This podcast does not survive without the help of its sponsors or its listeners. So every purchase or donation, no matter the size, is totally appreciated and helps keep this podcast coming to you every week. Okay, here's our panel, Tiki Art and Polynesian Pop in American Culture, from the world-famous San Diego Comic-Con.
Desert Oasis Room.
So I wanted to do this panel not only because I'm a Comic-Con fan and because I'm a Tiki Art fan, but because I have a lot of respect for the peoples of Oceania and Pacific cultures in general. I've only been able to go to Hawaii so far, but the artwork that they were able to make and the carvings in homage to people and to gods is fantastic, which then got interpreted to the work you're going to see today. So originally the word tiki came from Maori in the New Zealand area, where people did carvings at least 1,000 years ago of ancestors and gods. It got spread across the Pacific Ocean, which is an area larger than North and South America put together, just strings of islands of wildly different religions and cultures. And finally, you had forms of tiki from statues to carvings in all the major island groups, which are loosely divided into Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia, Polynesia being where Hawaii and Rapa Nui are. And eventually this art, got reinterpreted and brought to America. And the first person I wanted to have talk to you is Martin Lindsay, he's an expert in San Diego tiki, and he also knows a lot about historical tiki becoming Polynesian pop and how it's morphed and changed. So Martin, can you talk a little bit about how in the World War II era and beyond, how tiki was brought to the U.S. and
sure.
About that?
Sure. Can y'all hear me right here? Okay, great. Beginning in the 30s, actually 20s and 30s, there was a popular, a lot of bars and restaurants were island themed, hula girl kind of themed, but it actually started after Prohibition. So in Mexico, actually, before Prohibition, we had a couple places here in San Diego and Tijuana area
Can you lean into the mic, Martin?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, here, how about that? Okay. In like 1928 in Tijuana, we had the Aloha Club. So these bars down in Tijuana area and things like that were fed by a lot of tourism and the military crowds coming through ports like San Diego and Los Angeles. So people coming through military installations and naval training center, places like that, they were coming and going from the Pacific Islands. When they actually came back, they decided, hey, you know what, this is really cool. I think I'm going to start my own place. So in the 30s, of course, places like Don the Beachcomber, Trader Vic's, and those kinds of places started out doing bars, but there wasn't that much tiki actually in them at the time. Thank you. Okay. All right. How's that better? So then when the tikis actually started appearing, that was more later on when they started incorporating the actual totems and effigies and carvings and things like that from the islands. But I think definitely here in San Diego, it comes from the military aspect and the traveling and exploration that you saw going on at that time. It's also one of the things in San Diego here, we had several places that were starting out later on in the 40s, and that's when they actually started incorporating more art from the Polynesian islands, including you're going to have bamboo, you're going to have a lot of tribal artifacts and things put in. So into the tiki bars, what happens then is a lot of people see them. They are also experiencing things from popular culture. It becomes more and more a popular culture thing when you see all of these things in movies. It's romanticized, and all of the people that are visiting these places are saying, hey, this is really cool. I could actually do this in my own home, that kind of thing.
Hey, so Martin, I know you spent years working on this book that's about to come out. It's 90 years in San Diego Tiki, and it sounds like it's been an enormous project. Can you just briefly, because we're constrained for time, just talk about the process of researching, writing? We were talking about this a few weeks ago, and then releasing this book.
Well, I'm actually self-publishing it, so it's been a lot more work than just having somebody else do it for me. It's taken 3-4 years of research, along with talking to people like these guys here about all of the things they know about. I feel like I'm more of a collector of information rather than a historian, but all of that stuff kind of goes part and parcel. You start going down a rabbit hole and figuring out, okay, well, we have this one little matchbook from a really cool tiki bar. What about it? Who are the people that actually started it? Who are the people that put all that blood, sweat, and tears into making it a really cool bar? They wanted to start a bar or a restaurant. What happens then? So you do a lot of research, you do a lot of going to archives, you talk to people, you talk to 90-year-old custodians of photo archives. You go out and find actually interviews with people. So it's a lot of work that way. As an art director in an advertising agency, I know all about the printing aspect of it. So that's part and parcel of the whole project. But finding bids from printers, working with color proofing, all that stuff, it takes years to get it done properly.
I appreciate that. We're looking forward to seeing your book. I'm sorry that I have a lot of visuals. I'm hoping I can get them up on the screen in the next minute or two. So Susanna, I know you've worked in corporate branding and in sort of traditional, not 8 to 5 like a lot of us work, and as a commercial artist, and then you broke out on your own. Can you talk a little bit about being an entrepreneur and being self-employed versus working for a large corporation?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Other than doing tiki art, my main career has been, is this on? A little bit? Okay. I've worked in the toy industry for about 12 years, so I've worked for Hasbro and Disney and places like that. And you have to weigh the positives and negatives of, a steady paycheck and health insurance. Those are really nice. But then you're listening to marketers and licensors, and you have these big dreams and ideas you want to see, and they get cost cut, and you kind of have to like see a lot of dreams die, and so it's been nice. This past year, I've quit that, and I'm doing my own art full time and gone freelance, and it's been fantastic because it's a big risk, but when you put yourself out there and you just have a good reputation because you have a good work ethic, you can make it happen, and it's definitely worth it. It's definitely worth the long hours and late nights and all the work you have to do to self-promote, which is hard for a lot of artists because we want our art to speak for itself. But that's part of the job, is you really have to get out there and not be afraid to talk to people and not be afraid to promote yourself. So it's been good.
The Comic-Con told me that we should I guess my mic must be a lot louder. I guess we should just kind of talk as loud as we can so everybody can hear in the back, although this isn't that huge of a room. If the tech person is around, could they come up? Because I'm still trying to get my images up. So in your work, what were your influences going from commercial art and then to becoming interested in tiki? Can you talk about inspirations and things?
Sure. I grew up in Santa Cruz, so it's oh, hi. There we go. It's a surf town, so I was always around kind of the surf culture. And then I went to art school up in San Francisco and went to the Tonga hut, or the Tonga room, for the first time, and seeing that whole rainstorm that they do. And I was just fascinated, what is this all about? This whole, place you're transported to, and you're drinking out of a pineapple, and there's rain inside, and a cheesy band that comes out on a catamaran. And I just loved it, and I wanted to find out more. And from there, I found out about Trader Vic's in Emeryville, and started going to all the bars, and then you started meeting other like-minded people in really loud shirts. And then you find out there's this whole community, kind of in the early days of the internet, there was Tiki Central before, yeah. And it was great, and I met so many people through that. When I moved to LA, I worked at the Lucky Tiki, which is a long-gone tiki bar, which is sad. But it was great. It's such a positive, creative community of people, and it's really changed my life. Tiki has just changed the course of my career and my friendships. So.
And Susanna, throughout the rest of this year and into next year, what do you see yourself working on, painting, sculptures, or?
Next big thing is Tiki Oasis. That's coming up in a month now?
3 weeks.
There, good. So that'll be really fun. That's always a crazy fun party, and I've got a glass design coming out for Martin Kate's bar up in San Francisco, the Smuggler's Cove. So that's exciting. Yeah.
Hey, Tom, can you show your book to the audience?
Yeah.
So I had a bunch of images. We'll see if we can get those, but just kind of flip open some pages. And again, like Martin was talking about, tell us, this is a retrospective or a partial of your work. How did this process come about? And
The process of the book?
The book and choosing the photos and the whole thing.
This is an independent publisher in Wisconsin. And they are normally they normally publish books of pinup photographers. And as you can see, I have a lot of powerful, sensual female forms in my book. So they thought I would be a good fit for them to do their first book. And I sent them basically my whole, all of the work that I have, good photos of, which for those artists out there, make sure you get good photos of your art, because there's paintings that I did that are, sort of seminal pieces in my career that I can't chronicle because I don't have good photos. So very important. But the people at Working Class Publishing are amazing, Bob and Kelly, and they I sent them the work, and they composed this beautiful book. There's some compositions in here that I kind of never would have thought of, and juxtapositions of things that I didn't see between my tiki art and my custom culture art, which is the sort of hot rod stuff. But there's a lot of really cool sort of spreads and stuff. So definitely a collaborative effort, and I think it nicely sort of presents my weird tiki and other sort of.
You've done a lot
transgressive art.
of traveling and surfing and gone to Pacific Islands, and I think you have an upcoming trip to Rapa Nui, maybe?
We're working on it.
So tell us about, because I mean, to me, travel is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I got into tiki was I used to work at art direct surf companies, and this one company that I worked at. Should I be using the microphone? I guess I don't need it. I'm kind of a loudmouth.
No, that's good. The people in the back need to hear.
Okay. So working for one particular surf company, they used to send all of the artists at the company and then professional athletes to different Polynesian island groups. So we would go to Tahiti and Fiji and Samoa and all the Hawaiian islands and go surfing and sort of do research and development. And part of that, we wanted to try to immerse ourselves in the cultures and learn about it. So that's really, this is in the early 90s, and so that's where I kind of developed an appreciation for the mana of all the different art traditions of the different Polynesian cultures. So yeah, I mean, travel is definitely battery recharging for an artist.
I don't want to cut you off, but I want to make sure everyone has a chance to talk. So, Bosko, I had a clip of your film, and it looks like we're just going to have to talk about the film. But can you talk a little bit about your documentary that was made? I know for some people, like Robert Williams talked about it being very trying, the documentary. I mean, was it challenging? Did you enjoy it?
It was the most pleasurable experience of my life. I'm not being facetious.
The worst or the best?
The best.
Oh, the best.
The most pleasurable. It was just the whole crew we worked with were all like top-notch Hollywood people. It was not. You were never left wondering what's going to happen next or what are they going to do. Or it was just. It just kept going up. From the start to when it got screened at the Egyptian
How
Theater.
can the fans watch the movie?
September, it's supposed to be a new, longer version supposed to be released. So look on social media or our website.
How much longer?
When you're carving in the film, you're really intent. It's like, tell me about your thoughts before you take the piece of wood, carve it while you're carving, and then when you're done. Like, what's going through your head?
Well, for a larger piece, I like to live with the log for a little while and kind of get a sense of what's in there, what wants to come out. I didn't realize until you mentioned it that I looked so intense when I'm doing my art, but I guess I do. You're just, as you're carving, you're looking at this 3D form in space and you're trying to bring up certain elements of it, and I really can't describe it. It's like being on a wave. You're in a zone, and you don't hear anything around you. You're just working on this thing.
And the other thing is, I know you're constantly turning out new work. I mean, are you working on any really large projects or anything big that you'd like to talk about or share?
Yeah. Well, we have the website. I mean, I've been doing this for 25 years now. This is my 9-to-5 job, is making tiki art, sculpture, ceramics, designing spaces. At the moment, we're finishing a big job out in Maui. I'm doing a show of my other art, ironically enough, that has nothing to do with tiki, up in Hollywood on the 18th, so I'm working on that as well. I know it doesn't have anything to do with this, but that's what I do every single day out in the shop. It's just tiki, tiki, tiki. It's
This art, I want to ask a few of the artists. So you may not know this, folks, but some very powerful and influential people all went to California State University, Long Beach. Two of them went to art school, which was Josh and Tom. One became a little bit famous, Steven Spielberg, and then I went to school there. I'm not quite as famous as any of the other ones, but a lot of the other panelists also went to art school, and I've always been interested in the whole formal education versus self-taught kind of thing. So maybe any of the folks like Josh, can you chime in? How valuable is art school? Would you recommend people go?
Well, yeah, I would. If you're into art and you want to be an artist, I would definitely say go to art school, because that taught me a work ethic, how to paint every day, how to meet deadlines, how to do things I hadn't been able to do before. And speaking of Cal State Long Beach, where both Big Toe and I went, they stressed a really classic art education. So I remember I had friends going to art schools all over Southern California, and I was struggling to paint like a life study of some flowers in a bowl on a table with some fruit with oil paint for my final painting project. And my friends were nailing beer cans to chairs. And they all work at Aaron Brothers or. So I think because it was a really classic art education, it gave me certain things that I definitely use every day as an artist. So you can make it without going to art school. A lot of well-known artists have done that. If you've got a really good work ethic and a passion for doing it. But I wouldn't have been able to have this career if I hadn't gone to art school.
Another thing is I've noticed both yourself and Mr. Geeky Tiki, Brandon, have been able to land an enormous amount of licenses to do Star Wars and Disney and Planet of the Apes and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which is pretty amazing, merging pop culture. I mean, not necessarily with Tiki, but just with art. And I was talking to you a little bit last night about this, and I've talked to other artists too, and occasionally it can be challenging dealing with these large companies to get the licensing rights or whatever. So maybe both Brandon and Shag can talk a little bit about, like, when you want to work with these companies, because I believe, Brandon, you have is it 149 licenses?
We've got around 150.
I was drinking rum with them last night. I was giving them
We
a hard
haven't done
time.
them all.
So,
Golden Girls Tikis haven't come out just yet, but there's a little sneak peek. It's coming.
When you're dealing with, when you're getting so you want to do Millennium Falcon, whatever it is. Oh, by the way, the main thing I wanted to get across with this guy is Lando Calrissian, Return of the Jedi, Billy D. Williams, and I was just going to say,
it's pretty cool. He's going to be signing our Tiki mugs today. That's pretty cool.
Is he as amazing in person as he is in Return of the Jedi?
I haven't met him personally.
Okay. So go on about the licensing part.
All right. So we started, I merged two of my favorite things together, which was Star Wars and Tiki, and it turned into, Geeky Tikis, and does anybody out there have a couple of them?
Well,
That's pretty
cool. You got one sitting in front of you in that box.
We do. It was very challenging when I first started. So one, to take these iconic characters that I had grown up with and put my own spin on it and Tiki-fy them. Lucas wasn't on board initially, so we did some designs. They said, "Oh, you could, we'll do these couple characters. You can't do Darth Vader." We did it anyways. We brought it to Comic-Con 4 years ago in my backpack, and we showed it to the Lucas team, and they said, "This is pretty cool. With some changes, we can make this work." So it was really, I was inspired. It was a lot more fierce looking. The stance, we really kind of took traditional Tiki, and it had to change because of licensing issues. But what we have now is something that I'm very proud of. It's a fun, whether it's not true Tiki, but it's a fun interpretation of what we think it is. So
now I have heard that from the Tiki purists who maybe even be in the audience, that they're like, "Hey, Star Wars, how is it?" And now we even have the breakfast cereals. We have Blueberry.
Those are some of my favorites. Yeah,
some other ones.
It's basically anything that I grew up with or that I love I'm passionate about.
It reminds me of what Josh does too, because it's all these things that I grew up with too, across every part of pop culture. Like Josh did the Spider-Man with the Sinister Six and Stan Lee, and in addition to all these other things. But I'm just curious, have either of you ever wanted to work with a property and then for whatever reason backed out, or it was just too problematic? I mean, you don't have to name names, but...
I've been approached by a lot of properties that I just wasn't interested in. Things maybe a lot of people are into them, but not me, and I knew if I did it, I could probably sell a ton of them. but I just didn't feel it. And I knew that if I didn't feel it, then I wouldn't be able to make something cool, and it would just be, it would end up being a piece of junk. So that's kind of more my thing. And it's rare that I actually go pursue an actual, company or license. Usually they've approached me in the past. The only one I actually went out of my way to get was Kiss, the rock band Kiss, which was recent, because Gene Simmons had a reputation for suing everyone, and I knew that if I went ahead and did it, he would sue me. So I had to approach his agent and negotiate a deal. And the other thing that's involved with licensing is also, it usually involves a lot of money, unfortunately. They want a lot of money up front if you're going to do something with their likeness. Kiss, I went back and forth with them, and they kept asking for more and more. And finally, I just, said, okay, And they said, well, we'll talk next year. And then they called me next year and said, okay.
So I wanted to talk to Devon a little bit. We were talking at your booth, and so you were originally from Michigan, you went to Portland, Oregon, and now you're here. And your horror, I believe horror is your thing. I don't know why I'm getting that, but I think you have a site called Creepy Tiki. And can you talk a little about your horror fandom?
Yeah, sure. My introduction into Tiki, I was born in the Midwest in the late 70s, so there was no Tiki where I grew up. So my introduction was two things. It was Scooby-Doo, and it was the Brady Bunch. And so when I moved to Portland, I wasn't really making any Tiki art, but I've been doing horror art for my whole life. And I started hanging out at Hale Pele and became friends with the owners. All right. And so they started hiring me to do menu illustrations, Mai Tai glasses, and so then I started bringing that stuff to the convention, and then that started becoming the most popular stuff on the table. And then later that year, I was at a horror convention, and I got to sit next to Victoria Price, who is Vincent Price's daughter. And she said, hey, that's cool. Why don't you do something with my dad from the Brady Bunch? So she hired me to do an illustration of Vincent Price in the Tiki Caves, and that became like a pretty popular piece for a while, and that's what most people know me for in the Tiki world. And I don't know, it just kind of came full circle. So like horror and Tiki were always things very early on. That was kind of my inception. So it's like, that's always been two connected things to me. Yeah.
Yeah, you were mentioning, I'm not sure if this is related to the artist here, but the guy that bought every bit of art from La Luz de Jesus, Tiki related, he's doing a new Michigan Tiki bar.
Yeah, I guess like maybe what looks like it might be the biggest Tiki bar in America. I don't know, maybe you guys can talk about this, but it's going to be in Grand Rapids, Michigan, called Max's Hideaway. That's where actually I went to art school. And so another weird full circle thing. But I think he came in and bought most of the La Luz show.
The first day of that show, you go in there, and it's like everything is sold. And then they said, one guy bought everything. What?
You've got a kind of a small booth, like a traditional size booth. I know Shag's got a really large, impressive booth, and then there's a booth under the Star Wars sign too, there's a booth across from the Star Wars shoes. I'm not sure which booth that is, but that's a pretty impressive booth too. When you're like a smaller vendor at these, especially Comic-Con, which is gigantic and crazy, can you talk about that experience, just selling stuff here?
Comic-Con has always been my biggest show. I've been exhibiting here since 2002, and I started in small press, and actually I think my booth is a pretty good size. Yeah.
Well, no, it is. You've got a lot of good work. You've got a lot of good work in your booth, and I recommend everyone goes to all three of their booths in the same visit, actually.
Yeah. So
and there's a spacesuit in Shag's booth, so that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, they kind of have us all in that same area in the 4,000s to 4,700.
Well, give the number out to the
family. Booth 4614, and you can get this wonderful cabana set that we just had put together last night by Volcano Design. So anybody debuting that today at the show, anybody can buy. We've got cabanas, we've got glassware, we've got original art. So come on by to 4614. Thank you.
Just real quick, I was going to mention with regards to Max's Hideaway, Bosko did 20 huge poles for that bar. It's a 3-story, 2 stories of bar, and then one story. The top story is an Airbnb, and it just blows me away that just this one, obviously legendary carver did 20 giant poles for that one bar.
I think another thing Bosko needs to be recognized for is he's the very first person in 25 years to make a new tiki mug. So everyone makes tiki mugs now. There was a period where nobody thought to do that, and Bosko was the very first one to do
Bosko,
that.
hold the mug up.
Thank you.
Hold the mug up. And for you folks that are visiting San Diego, which many of you probably are, you got to know that False Idol is just the Little Italy trolley stop. It's basically a Bosko bar. It's in the back of Craft and Commerce, and the other must-see restaurant in San Diego is the Bali High, which is like a testament to this entire Pacific Island, everything. That's on Shelter Island. Very, very important. Y'all visit those at least once. I wanted to mention too that over in the corner there we've got Adrian, and I don't want to butcher your last name, but he does this Tiki podcast Desert Oasis Room, which you should all download and listen to. He was kind enough to come down, and I think it's possible that this entire panel may be on the Desert Oasis Room. Is that right? In a future episode?
Most people here have already been on the show.
Okay, but this panel too might. I mean,
This panel is
right.
recorded for a future episode.
Yeah, cool.
So and then we also have, I think we have Holden from Tiki Farm in the audience somewhere. So he's very shy, he's in the back, and he's dressed very conservatively, but for those of you that don't know, they're just up the coast in San Clemente, Orange County, and they've done an unbelievable amount of mugs. It could be even a couple more than Geeky Tiki, I don't know.
A lot more, yeah.
Okay. And if you get a chance to visit them, you can see there's probably work by many or most of these artists. I have a big collection at Tiki Farm, and one thing that I like with some of the mug manufacturers is someone on a normal kind of budget. I mean, I'd love to spend $1,000 on a mug, but on like a Tiki Farm budget and a Geeky Tiki budget, you can build out your whole collection on a kind of a normal price point, which is great because collecting can get, I mean, as we all know, collecting can get to be pretty expensive. And it's nice when artists have stuff that kind of the average person can make, which is, I mean, it's good. Like Shag, for example, makes prints, and I mean, a lot of folks sell prints and they're selling them here. So you can pick these up and appreciate. And the books too. I mean, books like Tom's book, hold it up again, are a great way to get copies of this art at a normal. Well, how much is your book selling for, Tom?
$75.
Okay. And
Printed
Martin?
in America.
Nice.
I'm sorry?
So, Susanna, do you have an art book out?
I don't, not yet.
So she'll be maybe next. Devon, do you have a book?
I have a bunch of comics and graphic novels that are not Tiki related, but you can find me on Amazon.
I think eventually, hopefully, there'll be some more compendiums. This is what I was kind of curious. So I saw one of the pieces I was going to show of yours, Tom, is a rare political piece from way back in the Bush administration. And I'm kind of curious about, because I know a lot of your art, it's sort of inspired by some underground-ish cartoons. And for the panelists here, it seems like you've primarily had kind of G-rated art, not very controversial. But has anyone wanted to do anything more on the political end or anything pushing boundaries beyond just Tiki that you haven't done or you have and you just haven't displayed? I mean, anybody go ahead and speak up.
Well,
No.
I would just say that Tiki is definitely sort of transgressive in nature. So I think it's kind of natural for Tiki artists to do political stuff. It's all kind of un-PC, so I think that's a natural fit.
There's a whole group of sculptures I do that are very political, socio-political themed, but it doesn't look anything like the Tiki art I do. It looks more like a Viewmaster kind of art you might have seen in the 60s, and they all look very innocent, but there's a subtext to the pieces.
You know, we used to hear this expression lowbrow art a lot, and it seems like now it's sort of merging with fine art. I mean, is there any point to even having distinction between fine art, lowbrow art, whatever? Is it all just art, or are these labels kind of meaningless now? Does anybody anyone want to chime in?
Well, real lowbrow art is a specific kind of art. You know, it doesn't aspire to be fine art. You know, so when you meet a real lowbrow artist like Franco out in Palm Springs, that's what he wants to do. It's like Big Daddy Roth kind of stuff. He doesn't aspire to do other kinds of art. You kind of dilute it, if you ask me. When you're trying to be in a fine art world, doing lowbar art. Lowbar art, requires a certain attitude, a certain, right?
Yeah. My book is called The Unaspirational Art of...
There you go.
So I was going to go into the entrepreneurialism a little bit more because we were talking to AtomiKitty about that. So for the folks that have worked both in the corporate commercial world and then being self-employed, I mean, let's say some people out here are thinking about working for themselves. Can you talk about the pros and the cons or the do's or the don'ts? Anybody?
I always tell everybody, don't do it. It's just,
You sound like my dad.
I mean, now the business is relatively successful, but it took 25 years for this. I mean, when we started, I was doing mugs all through the 90s. Nobody even knew why would you want to do a tiki mug. And the same thing with the carving. It wasn't until 2001 we did our first restaurant, Taboo Cove, in Las Vegas. And it was the first new bar built in the country since the 70s. And since then, it took another 10 years for this to kind of get a little more mainstream. I mean, it's nothing you want to try to retire on.
So is there any of the panelists here who are going to maybe go back to doing branding or marketing, or do you just, because I did talk to one artist who he's on the weekends he does his tiki art and then he's got a corporate 8-to-5 job. I mean, do any of you think you're going to end up going back, just kind of do the art as a hobby?
I could talk to that for a little bit. I'm an art director in an advertising agency, so the art that I do tiki-wise is something that I do for fun rather than all the corporate branding and everything that we do on a daily basis. The last fun project I did was for Golden Optimist Tiki at the Bali High, and that was a fundraiser. I did all the artwork for the advertising, and it ended up being on some glasses and stuff like that. And Devon's done that too as well for the fundraisers. But on a daily basis, when you're working on websites and branding for everything else, it gets a little monotonous, and you want to do a little something fun else. So that's one of the things that I like about doing tiki art and illustration.
Hey, Adrian, do you have any interest in coming up here and sharing one of your? I want to hear your craziest or funniest story, because you've interviewed like several hundred people. I mean,
yes.
And your show's gone. You could just stay. Your show's gone for years, right? So tell me what your craziest or funniest or wildest experiences with these artists, because we all know that artists, they can be kind of a temperamental lot and very interesting, diverse lot.
Well, I'll say, so this is the third year of the podcast, and what's really fun about it is I'm getting to meet some of these people that I always just knew them really on a peripheral level. We go to these events, we go to parties, we go to bars, but a lot of times I don't even know what people do for a living. I don't know what their other interests are. So when we do these podcasts, we really kind of do a deep dive on where their motivations are, why they got into what they do, the other things that they like outside of tiki. And it's been a real, I feel like I have deeper relationships now. And what we're trying to do with the podcast is not only document what's happening with the current tiki movement, but also showing that the common thread amongst all of these artists and musicians and all of us revelers in this tiki world is that we're all searching for escape, right? This whole tiki movement is about escapism. I think everybody here would love to win the lottery, right? Everybody wants to quit their job. Everybody wants to do the things that they're passionate about. And that's kind of the common thread. I know you're asking me like what some of the unusual things are. Like every experience is, nothing particularly stands out other than that we all kind of are the same. We all are kind of in this pursuit of happiness. We're all kind of like, again, escaping the tropical island is kind of like this destination that we're gravitate towards.
Let me ask you this. You have a beautiful tiki bar.
Thank you.
I was just at the most amazing home tiki bar last night that I've ever seen, that I even thought of. When you were building it out, did you use art from any of these folks when you're building, or talk about
Yeah.
those who want to build their own home tiki bar? Talk about that process.
Okay. So there are unwritten rules about tiki. I try to follow those things. It's funny is because like a lot of these things are employed in bars and restaurants from, what we like is this kind of escapist experiential experience. And a lot of that is removing the outside world. So some of these unwritten rules are the no windows, no TVs, no clocks. It's about keeping you from being distracted into what is reality, right? It's funny that all these old restaurants employed those things, including casinos. Most casinos back in the day, no TVs, no windows, no clocks. They also wanted to take you away from your reality. They wanted to have you be immersed in their environment so they could take your money. But also it's about escapism, right? It's about just forgetting that you got to go to work tomorrow. Right now you're going to have a drink, you're going to maybe play some cards and have a good time. And then building the home space, you kind of follow these same principles. Perpetually dusk so that you don't know what time it is. Again, removing distractions. There's no clocks in my room. Because when we're there, we're having a good time. And when we do the podcast, it's again escapism. We tell our stories, we enjoy the company of our friends, and we have a good cocktail maybe while we're doing all that.
I know Holden is kind of a shy guy, but Holden, do you have any interest in coming up here and answering a question? Give a big round of applause. Holden from Tiki Farm right here. I think first of all, just give a brief synopsis on what got you into the business and then this crazy ride it's been.
Hey everybody, my name's Holden Westland. I have a company called Tiki Farm. I came from an industry of science before I started Tiki Farm, and the predecessor to Tiki Farm was an early .com business called eBachelor Pad, and it was everything under one roof for the ultimate bachelor pad. And Tiki, being a Southern California native, was my favorite element of my offerings for that, and I figured if I could represent products wholesale for Tiki, then I could stick a couple in my house. Anyway, so I represented a company early on called Dynasty, and their mugs were not of the best quality. And ironically, this gentleman here in the center, Bosko, in 2000 I met, and I rep Bosko even for about a year. And so that's how it started. And I just love making mugs.
Thank you. I wanted everyone to know that 3 of the folks here have booths. Can you all give their booth numbers in case people don't know? Who have the booths here?
I'm 3920, sandwiched between Comedy Central and Konami.
And you're doing signings at 3 p.m. every day?
Yeah,
okay.
3 to 4 every day.
And he has an astronaut suit in his booth.
Yeah, you can actually get inside the suit and take a picture of yourself as if you're floating in space.
Okay, and Brandon, you were under the StarArs sign next to the...
Yeah, we're right under that giant Star Wars sign.
Okay.
Geeky Tiki's 2913M. So a lot of people probably came by and said aloha, I hope so. But come by, say hi. We got a great team over there. We'll answer any questions, give some sneak peeks of stuff we're working on.
Now, what about
if Lucas isn't around?
Lando Calrissian, what about...
Lando is not at our booth, but he's going to be over at Entertainment Earth's booth from 3 to 5 today, signing, not this one, but the Lando Calrissian Tiki mug. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, you know what I think would be cool is you get the Millennium Falcon mug and then put all the characters in it and then fly it around. Especially if you had like a to-scale Death Star and then you're flying it down the trench. You're going yeehaw.
Are you taking notes?
Yeah,
Devon, what's your booth number?
And Devon Devereaux Art at 4614, and I also have a brand new mug at Mondo.
And I wanted to mention...
In Innsmouth Creek.
I
Oh, yeah.
wanted to mention really quick, I'm part of a group called Girls Drawing Girls. Yeah. And it's we have a booth against the back wall. Kelly, what's the booth number? 5628. It's a really cool group. There's a couple hundred members worldwide, and we're all people in the animation and toy industry. We're all girls that draw sexy pinups. So, yeah, it's a really cool, supportive group. We've got a booth. You can come buy some art.
Yeah. Some of the artists are going to come to a quasi-reception, not all of them because they have to go back and sell at their booths, but the Roy's Hawaiian in the back, apparently there's a shortcut. So I got a table if anyone wants to go back. It's just informal. And hopefully as many can come to sign because we can't do signings and photos in the room. And then the other thing I wanted to kind of cover is, we're not going to have a whole lot of time for questions, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about the travel before we get to any questions. So Josh, have you traveled to many tropical destinations? And I think you did live in Hawaii, didn't you? Can you talk about that in art?
I lived in Hawaii for 8 years, the first 8 years of my life. And I've been to New Zealand, and I think that's the only tropical islands I've been to, unless you count the south of Taiwan, which was very tropical.
Brandon, how about your travel? A Tiki-related travel.
Tiki-related travel. I have been to, I haven't been there, but I've been to Bora Bora, which I really enjoyed. That was a lot of fun. Recently went to Thailand. Yeah, I get out when I can, but I'm so busy working. I'm spending a lot of time, not as much time traveling as I'd like to, but this is my vacation in San Diego, but it's a fun one. Yeah.
And Bosko, so you grew up in the LA area, and you were carving. I mean, from your inspirations there. But have you been to any of these islands, and firsthand gotten inspiration for carving?
Yes, recently we went to 3 islands, and then in the 90s I went to Oahu and Kauai. The really weird thing about Tiki Polynesian Pop in the 60s was so much of the stuff you saw in the islands came from California. It wasn't from there.
Yeah.
And if I have just 1 minute, I could tell a real fast story. When I was just getting into this, I was trying to figure out how to carve a tiki, and there was a guy outside of the international marketplace in a loincloth, a big Tongan-looking guy, and he was out there every day pounding with a wooden mallet, and carving a tiki. So one morning I decided I was going to go out and watch how does he do this to see what, if I can steal his secrets. So I got out there very early. He came out, he dumped out a whole bunch of sawdust and got a log. He wasn't carving any of it. He was buying it from Tonga, and he would sit there all day pounding on this thing like advertisement, and people would come, there would be a crowd. He started this whole pidgin English thing. And he was just like a con man. And that's what the whole tiki thing really was originally. It was like this illusion. But he was just like the perfect example of it.
Wow. I wanted to hear each of the panel members' greatest influence or person that they admire. Going down, starting with AtomiKitty.
Wow.
Art or otherwise.
That's really tough. I mean, because I come from a traditional illustration background, so I wouldn't even know where to start. But a lot of my art is inspired by Golden Age and mid-century artists. So like pulp art and things that were, in the magazines in the 50s and 60s. So like Robert McGinnis, the amazing illustrator, like his compositions and colors are just amazing. You know him from like the 007, Bond posters, things like that. Just beautiful, dynamic stuff.
How about you, Devon?
As far as old masters, I'd say Hieronymus Bosch is probably my favorite. Any older, artist. Also heavily influenced by a lot of, illustrators like Drew Struzan and, even, folks like Shag, who's actually been one of my biggest influences. So very cool to be up here with this guy.
And Tom?
I guess in terms of a traditional artist, I would say maybe Paul Gauguin and Van Gogh and Frazetta and a thousand other artists. More contemporarily, I think the artists that got me interested in painting, transgressive art were artists like Robert Williams and Todd Shore and Bosko's buddy Mark Ryden. And also, I have to say Josh was a big influence in the amazing narrative of his work. so many people cite Josh as an influence. He's almost like the Ramones of contemporary art. But yeah, I mean, there's it's impossible to nail it down to one artist.
So if someone compared Josh to Andy Warhol, would that be near the mark or completely off the mark?
Are you asking me?
Yes, I'm asking you.
Yeah, I mean, he's an iconic pop artist at this point, and he's doing all these amazing collaborations and stuff. So I don't know. I don't know what that means to say that he's Andy Warhol, but he's definitely influential.
Bosko, greatest influence.
Well, I'm a classically trained artist, but when I decided to do tiki, I didn't know how to do sculpture. So my father taught me. He was a woodworker from the Guild of Craftsmen. He showed me how to carve, but I was lucky enough to meet Rolly Crump, Disney Imagineer, who did the Tiki Room. And he really helped me out a lot in the beginning. And then I also got to meet Mr. Westenhaver, who ran the Whitco Company. It was the biggest art production company from the mid-50s to mid-70s. And again, he was just a wealth of information. And to be able to meet your heroes from that era that were doing the thing that you're now doing, it's just unbelievable.
Martin?
Well, starting out as an illustrator, I think the golden age of illustration and all of those guys that were doing all the illustrations for books back in the day, I really liked. More contemporarily, I would say, my inspirations were Rick Geary, illustrator, good guy. Also, just a whole bunch of different people. So that kind of.
Brandon?
Well, all sorts of people. I grew up reading Mad Magazine, and I was an illustrator, and then I became a toy designer. I moved down to LA to be an animator and work for Disney, so I was heavily influenced by all the Disney artists. Got into the toy industry, and now I'm making mugs. And it's just, I try to bring that toyetic, fun element to the tiki world. So a lot of people, I get influence from, I'm inspired by everybody up here, and it's great. Everybody out there, I get inspiration all the time, so.
Well, for me, definitely Rolly Crump too. He, not only did he create most of the Enchanted Tiki Room, but he was a really cool sort of beatnik artist before that. And also a guy named Gene Deitch, who did jazz cartoons in the late 40s and 50s, and later on was an animator as well. And a lot of classic illustrators too that everybody's talked about. Robert McGinnis, who Susanna was talking about, believe it or not, has been a big influence on me. And a lot of anonymous commercial artists from the 50s and 60s, I don't know their name, but I know their work and I like it when I see it.
Yeah, I think it's really important, the people that came before, and, because a lot of, any music and art and everything else is probably going to be derived from earlier, and it's really hard to separate it all out. But I wanted to take just a couple questions until we get kicked out of the room. So, anyone right here, sir?
So with the growing spread of popularity of tiki and licensing and stuff, it's time tiki reform. At what point does it stop, or does it stop becoming tiki and just becomes pop art?
Oh.
How do you keep it tight?
Good question. Good question. Maybe because I've heard. I keep looking at Brandon. Yeah, I've heard some of the traditionalists say that there's a hard limit, and this is with anything in general. It's kind of hilarious, actually. It's like this is because I think humans want to categorize and put things into containers. But yeah, anybody throw out the answer to that?
I think as it becomes more and more popular with all American culture, it's going to get a little more genericized as there's a broader audience, and then more people will say, oh, this is tiki, this is tiki, this is tiki. And some of the purists are going to say, no, it's not really. But then you have to stop and ask yourself, what do you consider to be tiki? It's a whole culture, it's a phenomenon, and it's always been an amalgamation of a lot of different things. ever since the very beginning. It's been a faux Polynesia, so it hasn't actually been one real thing. And tiki's like one of those words now that means a lot to a lot of different people. Back in the day, there was a company called the Escalator Company. They made moving sidewalks, but not every moving sidewalk was an escalator. So you call that an escalator. So you call whatever tiki now. Same way with if you make a Xerox of something.
Anyone else?
I really like that it's expanding too, because honestly, the tiki community was pretty small for a while, like the resurgence in the 90s, and we've all been, building home bars, and our places are full of art. We're saturated, so we need new people to buy art and buy mugs. And so I embrace new people. I want to meet new people and get them excited about tiki, because it's really fun to collect. It's great to have a home bar where it is escapism. So I think it's a really nice compliment to the Comic-Con thing. It's all about the joy of just immersing yourself in something you love. And it's a positive thing. So I don't like to be elitist about it, because there's room for everybody.
All right. Anyone? Any other questions? You, sir. This may be the next to the last, so.
Not so much a question as an observation about like the prominence of tiki. Spider-Man Far From Home, there are two characters, Ned, who is the nerd friend, wearing a Hawaiian shirt, there's lots of Hawaiian shirts here, but also like the jerky rich kid Flash is also wearing a Hawaiian shirt in the same scene. And so it's just like this proliferation where it's not even needed to be commented on, it's just this baseline like, Hawaiian shirts are something just about anyone can wear in any context now. Yeah. It's just something that's like so low level popular acceptance where several years ago you would have had like.
That's a great observation. You, sir. You may be the last question. Go ahead.
Yeah, you have a question, but I also wanted to thank all those great artists.
Oh, that's right. If we do get kicked out of the room, remember their booths, and then the Roy's Hawaiian, when a few of us will be going, and then also make sure you look up everyone's book and website and all that. I guess maybe we have time for one more question.
Well, he had a question.
Are you done? We finished?
Yeah.
Okay, who wants to go ahead?
I'll talk about it.
Yeah,
Go ahead. You can go.
This is going to be lightning round. Cultural appropriation.
Is this the one in Corvallis outside of Portland? Is that the one? Yeah. It was. I mean, it was very kind of just generic tiki. I remember when that happened. I was living in Portland at the time when that happened, and yeah, there was a big question of like what is a cultural appropriation, and like who's being offended, and but I mean Portland is a very sensitive city for that for sure. So I mean I think a lot of it can kind of pass in other places, but there's a lot of people policing that kind of thing in the Portland area.
I would say specifically to that bar, the depiction of tiki was kind of offensive. It was real cartoony and rings in the nose, and I think that there's a threshold where it no longer has any kind of reverence for the original culture and kind of gets kind of insulting.
It seemed like that one specifically seemed like more of a cash grab than actually kind of celebrating the culture, which is what all the best like tiki bars will do, actually celebrate the Pacific Islands. And this one was just like, let's go to Party City and get some clown tiki and just make something out of it. Yeah.
Go ahead.
That's a great drink.
Well, I haven't had a drink in 5 years, but I used to have a go-to, and that was the Singapore Sling, because that was really tart and not sweet.
I'm a painkiller guy.
I like the Bombo. Anyone? It's real simple. It's real simple with a little nutmeg on top. So.
Down the Beachcomber Rum Barrel.
Oof, that's good. Navy Grog for sure. If you've never had one before, Leilani Volcano.
Yeah, I would say Navy Grog, or if you get to go to the Mai Kai in Florida, the Black Magic is the most delicious drink on the planet. Yeah.
One more drink you can only get in one bar, and that's Ray's Mistake at Tiki T in LA. That was my favorite drink of all time.
Ray's Mistake from the Tiki T. I would also mention that I think Suzy is the only professional bartender on the panel.
Yep.
Okay, I'm getting the dreaded stop sign, but folks, if you want to ask questions and you can't grab your favorite panelists in the hallway, go by their booth or come to Roy's Hawaiian, which is right in the back here, and get a drink with us or whatever. And please patronize and buy stuff from these great artists. Thank you. Comic-Con. Next up, Little Lulu. Woo!
And there you have it. Tiki art and Polynesian pop in American culture from San Diego Comic-Con. If you enjoyed this episode, check out polynesianpop.podomatic.com to find previous feature-length episodes with some of our panelists, including Bosko Hrnjak, Tom Laura, Suzy Mosher, Martin Lindsay, and Holden Westland. And please help us keep this show on the air by going to desertoasisroom.com to pick up some merch or make a donation. I'd like to thank James Wasser for including me on this panel, as well as allowing me to record this episode for the podcast. Thanks again for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next time inside the Desert Oasis Room.